Hi everyone, I'm Taysa Brown. I'm the Provincial Silviculture Performance Assessment Specialist with the Forest Science Planning and Practices branch. This is a condensed What's New 2023 training session. It is intended for surveyors who are already familiar with the 2022 procedural changes. In this video, I will simply outline items that have changed since 2022. If you did not adopt the 2022 procedures last year, then please watch the three-part What's New training series instead. It should be linked here. The three-part series covers all changes since 2020. All right, before we get going, please make sure you're notifying your coworkers, clients, contractors, etc., that there are significant changes to BC's Silviculture Survey Procedures. It'd be very helpful if you could share a link to this YouTube channel and to the survey's website with them. I'd highly recommend reviewing the changes during your survey's pre-work to ensure everyone is aware and understands the changes. Also, please make sure you're referencing the 2023 manual in your survey contracts. For timing, the new changes come into effect on April 3rd. All surveys completed after this date must follow the new survey manual to ensure reporting compliance. We will also be releasing new REIS documents, the Results Information Submission Specifications. Our planned release is slightly delayed. Results has experienced significant functionality issues lately, and our results specialists need to prioritize the repairs given its prime reporting season right now. But as a heads up, the new REIS documents will apply for surveys completed after April 3rd. If you still need to report surveys completed prior to April 3rd, 2023, they can align with the old REIS documents. If you haven't already, please check out the BC Silviculture Survey's website. It has been fully updated. The 2020 and 2022 manual and cards no longer apply, so they have been taken down. In their place, there is now a new 2023 Silviculture Survey Procedures Manual. There is also a 2023 What's New document. The PDF cards have all been updated and are posted except for the FS657, where there are no changes. Given the extent of the updates, if you'd like to now take a silviculture course or the exam, the schedule is up to date and posted in the accreditation program and exam section. You can also find links to the What's New video training sessions at the bottom. Lastly, they're not quite ready, but we will soon be releasing self-calculating Excel templates to help you survey complex vertical stands. They will work for multi-storied, DFP, and layered surveys, so stay tuned for that. If you're more of a visual learner, I've also been creating some short field videos covering the key changes to silviculture survey procedures. You can find everything on the BC Silviculture Survey's YouTube channel. I'm really hoping to build it out this year. I want to prioritize making training videos on forest health and some of the harder alternative survey methodologies like DFP, multi-storied, and layered surveys. If you have any other ideas for content, or if you'd like to submit some forest health video clips, please reach out. I'd love to chat. If you're checking out the survey's website, you can download a digital copy of all the field cards, the FS657, 8, 9, 660, the 1138A. You'll also be able to soon download Excel templates for the data collection and compilation for multi-storied, layered, and DFP surveys. If you're a SNAP or SAP user, those apps can handle all of the changes. So if you've done updates over the last year, you should be good to go. If you need paper cards, the 2023 versions should be ready any day for ordering. So just follow up with the Victoria Distribution Center. Their information is linked in the surveys manual and on the What's New document. All right, so like I just mentioned, we are releasing new 2023 versions of the FS658, FS659, and 660. So what should you do with your old cards? Well, if you still have the 2020 versions, unfortunately, you will need to throw them out. They are not compatible at all with the new procedures. Then if you have the 2022 cards, you should be okay. You don't need to reorder the FS658 or FS659s. Use them up. The 2022 versions can work. For 2023, we basically just added 2 new columns where you can record the stratum or data types leading and secondary species. It's often different between the inventory and silviculture layers and between layers 1, 2, 3, and 4. We found that the cards were getting messy and the students were sometimes getting confused over what the data meant. So I think the 2023 cards are more user-friendly, but they aren't critical if you still have 2022 cards and if they worked well for you. Then for the FS660, if you're putting an order in, I would definitely get it. It's only $5 and there have been quite a few changes over the last year. All right, we now have section 3, preparing for a survey. Okay, let's start with section 3.1, file review. This is just a reminder, it's nothing new. When you're doing your file review in preparation for a survey, you need to check if your block overlaps with a spatially explicit government action regulation order, a GAR order. If you haven't been provided anything in your survey package, ask the licensee if it's because there are no overlaps, or if they expect you to look it up yourself. This is critical because some GAR orders address factors that stocking standards may not. And GAR orders supersede stocking standards, so you may need to do a site plan amendment, or you may simply need to collect extra survey information to ensure the GAR general wildlife measures are being met. So here's a quick example. The Caribou Region's GAR orders have general wildlife measures that address pre- and post-harvest Douglas fir composition levels. So when you're compiling your survey data and you're checking if you have adequate preferred and acceptable well-spaced trees at regeneration delay, you'd also want to make sure that you meet the general wildlife measure for Douglas fir composition. If you want more information specifically on the Caribou Region's GAR, please reach out to Shelley Barlow. She's the silviculture specialist for this region, and she does have some additional documentation on this. Next, 3.42. So this section covers the procedures for the assessment of vegetation competition. It looks different from previous years. I reorganized it to remove some out-of-date sections and to improve the flow of information, but nothing has actually changed. There's no changes to the procedures. Next, cannibal conifers. In this section, I just added a BMP text box highlighting that you do not need to collect cannibal conifer data if there isn't a maximum density in your stocking standards, or if you're clearly below the maximum density. Don't waste your time. I expect there will be an increasing number of stocking standards provincially without a maximum density threshold, given the 2022 Chief Forester memo. If you're a silviculture forester and you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It's posted on the Silviculture Survey's reference documents webpage. It recommends omitting or removing any reference to maximum density thresholds and stocking standards for even age stands. So surveyors, make sure that you're carefully reviewing the latest stocking standards to see if there's maximum density. Next, section 3.6. This covers basal area forest cover requirements. This isn't anything new. This came into effect in 2016, but it's an area of major noncompliance. I'll be covering this again more thoroughly in the section 9 presentation. Basically, if you have more than 5 meters square per hectare of basal area, or if your site plan requires that a specific basal area per hectare be retained post-harvest, then you must report basal area under a Layer 1 inventory component. You can't just submit basal area under your normal I and S layers and results. That does not meet your legal reporting obligations. You have to submit a completely separate Layer 1 inventory where all the data relates only to the Layer 1 trees. So this is a great example. All this data is specific to the Layer 1 trees. This SU also had a Layer 4 and a Layer 4S reported. So this SU met its reporting obligations. I also want to highlight a document that was released in 2022. It's a follow-up to the 2007 Forest Cover Stratification and Milestone Declarations document. It's called Using Stratification to Achieve Non-Timber Values. The main messaging of this document is that not all broadleaf trees or patches of broadleaf trees need to be removed to favor conifer production. You can retain broadleaf patches and strips aligned with a PPR 4611 to meet non-timber objectives. If you want to learn more, there is a presentation posted on the YouTube channel, and the document is posted on the Silviculture Survey's reference documents webpage. Next up, section 4, sampling principles. The manual now has more detailed guidance on when representative sampling and visual assessments are appropriate. They can be suitable if being conducted by highly skilled and knowledgeable surveyors with many years of related experience, who are also up to date on the latest methodologies. They are appropriate for your non-legal intermediate stalking surveys. For example, if you want to use a drone to map out a brushing treatment, that's fantastic. Or if you want to check on the efficacy of a treatment, or just do a check-in on a block before free growing, all very reasonable uses of a visual assessment. The Office of the Chief Forester is most concerned about the use of these sampling methods for free growing declarations. When used at free growing, they should be restricted to low-risk strata. A low-risk strata is clearly free growing with a recent plot survey, low forest health incidence and hazard, low basal area, and low species diversity. The only exception would be if there's a serious safety or access issue. For example, if you're on the mid-coast and there's no helipads or tow-in spots, and it's not possible to walk in from another block, road, or the beach, then of course you're going to need to use a helicopter or a drone to survey the block. Recently, I've been developing a matrix to help surveyors assess whether or not a visual assessment is appropriate for a free growing survey. This will provide professionals a way to demonstrate their due diligence. If a professional chooses to disregard the recommendations of the matrix, that's fine. They can just write a short professional rationale explaining why a visual assessment is needed or why it's appropriate. In their rationale, they can explain what steps they'll take to minimize risk and ensure they can meet their legal requirements. Right now, I just have a draft version. I've been making updates based on feedback. If you've yet to provide any feedback and you use visual assessments, then please reach out. I'd be happy to go over this with you and allow you to test it out and then get that feedback in. I would also like to include best management practices for completing visual assessments in the 2024 version of the Surveys Manual. I already have a fair number drafted covering pre-harvest considerations, the last survey, surveyor qualifications, office preparation, survey planning, the process itself, calibration, data review, self-audits, and record keeping. If you would like to provide some of your BMPs that help you reduce risks associated with visual assessments, I have 2 feedback forms. You can scan the QR codes on this slide to access them. All right, let's begin. Section 7, data collection. Okay, here's the new FS 658. We only made a few small changes from the 2022 card. So the first change, we added in 2 columns for the stratums, inventory and silviculture species. This is number 1 and number 2. I thought this was an important change because your leading species can sometimes vary between your inventory and your silviculture layer and between layers 1, 2, 3, and 4. So sometimes confusing trying to understand what did this data mean. The cards were just getting messy. So hopefully this will make the data entry and compilation a little bit smoother. Then you'll notice that we also changed the order of the columns. We now have for your species number 1, the height and age together, whereas before it used to be age, height. But realistically, this is how you actually collect data. You go to one sample tree, you generally start with height. That's why we now have height first, and then you figure out its age, and then you go to the second sample tree. The last change, we just switched the heading. We switched it from from competing vegetation to ground vegetation, and you'll see why in a few slides. All right, let's get into the 2023 changes. We'll start off with the definition of germinants. I listened to feedback from everyone who filled out my poll or reached out over the last year, and I've simplified the definition. A germinant will now be considered a less than or equal to 5 centimeter tall natural. So if you have a seedling that is greater than 5 centimeters, it's counted as a tree. If you have a planted seedling that is under 5 centimeters due to browse or some other damage, it's still considered a tree, not a germinant. Now, there's one special clause. If you take a less than 5 centimeter natural as a crop tree, as well spaced, then count it as a tree, not a germinant. That's needed because your total tree counts have to equal or exceed your well-spaced numbers. All right, example time. So the 2 photos on the left are both trees, not germinants. As you can see with the measuring tape, They are both greater than 5 centimeters. The example on the far right is a germinant. It's naturally regenerated and it's less than or equal to 5 centimeters. So to be counted as a germinant, it would not be included in the tree tallies by species. Now, how exact do you need to be? Well, if you're writing your accreditation exam, I would pull out your measuring tape so that you can be confident in your call on every single seedling. However, day to day, we want us to speed up surveys, not slow them down. So find something they can use to gauge whether or not it's a germinant or a tree. For me, my thumb is pretty close to 5 centimeters, so I'd start off using that. Now remember, you do need to be within 20% of an auditor for species composition and total density. So you have some wiggle room, but you want to make sure that you're within that range. Next, inventory height and age. The instructions for picking your inventory sample tree have changed slightly. From within your plot, you need to pick the tallest, excluding residuals, living tree for the target species. In 2022, I used the word healthy instead of living. After FABE did another review of the changes this winter, they decided that wasn't appropriate because the inventory should reflect all trees regardless of their health status. So we now just have to pick a living tree, so it actually simplifies the procedure even more. Next, silviculture height and age. Again, there's only a subtle change in language from the 2022 manual. The manual previously said to pick an average, well-spaced, or free-growing tree from within the 3.99 meter plot for the stratum's leading silviculture species. Now, most people interpreted that as a representative well-spaced or a representative free-growing tree, but you could interpret it as the mathematical average based on size or age. So to prevent any confusion, I've changed the wording to representative. So it now reads, select a representative, well-spaced or free-growing tree from within the plot for the stratum's leading silviculture species. Next, crown closure. There are a few changes for this. First, we are reverting back to the 2020 wording for ground-based estimates. That means you can estimate crown closure based on your plot and surrounding area. Next, while you can report crown closure to the nearest 1%, it is reasonable to round it to the nearest 5%, so 5, 10, 15, 20, etc. For accuracy, you're just trying to be within 10% of a photo interpreter. And then lastly, the photo interpreter team also wanted me to emphasize that crown closure estimates really should be done during full leaf flush conditions, aka summer. Now, we're obviously not going to stop surveying in the spring, fall, and winter for the sake of crown closure, but please do keep that in mind if you're surveying in a stand with lots of broadleaf trees or larch. Next, vegetation. This typically gets recorded at your full measure plots. In 2022, I had tweaked the wording to make it based on your plot area. We are not going ahead with that. We are reverting back to the 2020 wording. So your ocular estimate will capture vegetation from within and outside your plot. Also, I'm removing the word competing. This field can be used for more than just competing vegetation. So for example, based on local level needs, you may also want to record invasive plants, medicinal or edible plants, or important forage species. All right, moving on. In February, I released a new Swiss needle cast data collection procedure with David Rush, our coastal pathologist. The procedure applies to coastal BC. This data should be collected in stands with greater than 50% Douglas fir or stands that were intended for Douglas fir. So for example, if you planted 80% Douglas fir, but you now only have 40% Douglas fir in the inventory due to hemlock or alder infill, you should still collect this data. To be able to follow the procedure, your trees need to be 5 years old or older. The procedure focuses on needle retention for the last 4 years. Now, if you work in coastal BC, please make sure that you check out these training videos before you head to the field. They're posted on the Forest Health playlist of this channel. Also, the data collection spreadsheet and instructions are posted on the Silviculture Survey's reference documents webpage, and it's all linked in the survey manual. All right, next, I've given the Forest Health Resources section an update. The Forest Health Specialist indicated that the old Forest Practices Code Forest Health Guidebooks are too out of date and should no longer be referenced. Instead, you should be finding information on the BC Forest Health webpage. You can find info on individual forest health factors like Swiss mule cast, the forest health strategies, and overview surveys. They also recommended checking out the available CETAs, the stand establishment decision aids. If you go to the GEM website and type in CETA under the search bar, they will pop up. I've also linked CETAs for 8 different forest health factors in the surveys manual. Okay, next we have section 8, data compilation. All right, here's the new 2023 FS 659. There's only 2 tiny changes. We simply have added in the stratum inventory silviculture species number 1 column and number 2 column, and that is it. Okay, first I would like to talk about inventory species composition. This has not changed from 2022. I just don't think I did a great job at explaining it, so I want to re-clarify. So, if you have a single layer stand that will be reported to results under a layer I and S, then the inventory species composition will be calculated using the tree tallies by species from each 3.99 meter plot. If the basal area is less than 5 meters squared per hectare, then layer 1 trees can be included in the layer I and S. If that's the case, when you're doing your tree tallies by species in your 3.99 meter plots, you'd be including those layer 1 trees. But if you have more than 5 meters squared per hectare basal area, you would then need to report the SU as a multi-layer stand to results. Then your inventory species composition would be based on tree tallies by species for your layers 2, 3, and 4. But for your layer 1, you would calculate inventory species composition using number in by species from your variable radius plots, assuming you're using a prism. All right, next I want to talk about vegetation, so the back side of the FS 659. So there is space to record percent cover and heights for up to 7 species. There's also columns for annual growth, distribution, current competition, and potential competition levels. Now, the competition fields, they make sense if you're recording competing vegetation species. However, maybe you recorded some invasive or medicinal or edible species that aren't competitive to the crop trees. If that's the case, simply don't fill out these sections if they aren't useful to you. This whole section is for you. It doesn't get reported to the government, so fill out what makes sense. All right, now I'm just going to touch on stats for a quick second. On this slide, you can see a little clip from the FS 660 and then the 1138. So on the FS 660, we used to have a column for number of plots and then also for DF. And for people without a stats background, I think that confused them quite a bit. So for both cards, we've made a change. We've dropped the DF column and we've changed the instructions that's find the t value for n, just to simplify. So both cards have been changed in that way. For the 1138A, you'll also notice that it's been color coded, and I'm hoping if you're using it, you'll print it off in color, and I'm hoping it'll make it a little bit easier to follow the formulas if you're mathematically challenged. So just trying to make it as easy as possible. And then lastly, in the manual, there's now 2 stratum examples. I just wanted to add in one example where you needed to calculate how many more plots were required because you had an uncertain stocking decision. And I just want to emphasize, when you're using this formula right here, the e-value has to be the per plot e-value, not the per hectare e-value, or the number of new plots just won't make sense. So hopefully that helps. Good luck. And at some point, I will get a stats video up on this channel to help you out too. All right, next I want to cover results reporting for declarations. Bill 23 was passed in November 2021, and it amended FRPA. The amendment now makes written declarations mandatory for regeneration delay and free growing. I think most people already thought that was a legal requirement, so it shouldn't impact most licensees. Nevertheless, this is important, so I just wanted to make sure everybody understood this obligation. Now, it does say a written declaration, but you don't actually have to physically write anything down and submit it. You just need to use the milestone declaration window in results. I also want to highlight FPPR 97.7. It says that a current forest cover update is required when a milestone declaration is submitted. So what does current mean? Well, when asked, the results team has always said that means within 18 months. So you can use that as your guidance. Okay, next, Section 9, Alternative Survey Methodologies. I only made minor changes to sections 9.2 to 9.4. The main changes are in section 9.1, which actually provides background information. I mostly focused on how to choose the appropriate survey method and how to report stands with greater than 5 meters squared basal area per hectare. It's been an area of consistent noncompliance. If there's any chance that you'll be surveying in a stand with some dispersed layer 1 trees, please go watch the linked section 9 video. Okay, finally we have section 10, which covers accreditation and training. If you would like to take in-person field training, there are 5 and 10-day courses happening this spring in Sorrento, Parksville, and Prince George. These courses cannot run unless there's adequate numbers, so if you're interested, I strongly advise signing up early. I will be posting a fall schedule probably in August, so keep your eyes open for that too. Now, just as a heads up, if you're taking the exam, you will need to follow the 2023 survey procedures and use the new field cards. The 2020 methodologies are no longer a valid option. Whether you're an accredited surveyor or not, you need to stay up to date. So great job watching this video and learning about the new methodologies. I do have some other tips. If you're not already on the BC Silviculture Surveyor email distribution list, send me an email. This is the easiest way to hear about important changes or upcoming training opportunities. Next, please make sure that you have the latest documents downloaded on your tablet or printed. You should be carefully reviewing the What's New document, giving the Surveys Manual a solid scan each year, if not a comprehensive read. You will also want to make sure each year that you have the latest versions of the field cards. The FS660 in particular tends to get updated due to the damage criteria. Next, please make sure you're accessing training. That could be a silviculture survey course, like on the previous slide, or a training day focused on cedrus or a DFP. Or it could be a forest health workshop with your regional pathologist and entomologist. If they haven't hosted a training day recently, you can put a request in. Similarly, if there's a need for ecology training, let me know and I can try to get something arranged in your district with our regional ecologists. And that's it for this video. For more information, please carefully review the What's New document and read the 2023 Survey Procedures Manual. If you have any outstanding questions, reach out. My email is on this slide and at the start of the Surveys Manual. And with that said, happy surveying. Have a great season out there.